things happening. But now we are ahead of this, I'm sure, exciting and important discussion. Then we'll have a break, so you'll have time to rest a little bit and prepare to hit again in the evening. As you know, International Jazz Platform and Footprints Project, these are two things that are happening here in Łódź. And the Footprints Project is very closely connected, and it draws upon the idea of trying and developing our sector so that it's more sustainable. Today's discussion with our amazing experts will be exactly about that. We know we are experiencing some very important changes in the world, and we want you also to think about that. These are not the things that we have to all do, immediately, but these are things that we have to start thinking. So I'm giving voice to Gwen, our wonderful expert, who has come from Paris. Yeah.
Dobry wieczór. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. I had to catch my breath. I was locked outside actually, so I almost didn't make it, but always fine. Thank you very much, Carolina, and thank you for the International Jazz Platform and to the Footprints Project to have us here today with this wonderful panel. You will hear about them in a little bit. I'm especially pleased to be back in Poland. I haven't been for like a while because of COVID. I used to work in Katowice, so it's quite an emotional moment for me too. So my name is Gwendolenn. I'm the founder of an organization called The Green Room, which works on environmental sustainability in the music industry. So we support musicians, technicians, music professionals, venues, networks to change their practices and to take into account environmental issues. Because as we know now, for a fact that 100% of global warming is due to human activities, and we see also that human-induced climate change is already affecting us in many different ways, with extreme weather and climate events in all regions around the world. And actually the music industry is no exception to this. Maybe you've been experimenting this. I come from France. We've had quite a few events, festivals that have been cancelled already because of extreme weather events or because of the heat, and this is just the beginning. It was also happening already before COVID with, for instance, in Australia, some festivals being cancelled because of wildfires. And with the situation of COVID-19, actually, despite of the devastating consequences for the live event, we also saw this as an opportunity for musicians and some music professionals that took the occasion to somehow rethink their practices and to join various communities and initiatives to support a fairer and a more sustainable industry. But also...
Sorry, getting excited by the street.
The communication guy. Also at the same time, we see that a systemic approach to the problem still seems kind of out of reach. This is because of the complexity of certain fields, the lack of research, also specific to our practices, and sometimes also misconceptions to which these subjects are represent, and this kind of increase the delay, and we know also that we are facing an emergency to act. So this is quite a large topic. We have only 1 hour ahead of us, actually 45 minutes. The idea is really to start a conversation with our speakers, and then we'll open the floor for you to react, maybe to share some of your experiences, I know some of you in the venue have already been part of Footprints, so maybe if you want to share also what your approach to this. Let me introduce very briefly our speakers today. We have Garance Amieux, we have Sissel, Vera, Pettersen, and we have Ceyda, Berk-Söderblom. I hope I'm pronouncing that well. Welcome to this panel. And actually, Garance, if you allow me, I would like to start with you, because as Carolina said, we are here in the framework of Footprints, which is actually working not only but on this issue of environmental sustainability in links with other impacts. So first, maybe could you introduce briefly what the project is about, and also maybe give us some insights to the study that you've made in the last 2 years.
Yeah, so I'm Garance. I work at the Periscope, which is a concert venue in France, in Lyon specifically. And I'm a project manager for a support program for musicians and cultural project leaders to help the local scene get more structured. Apart from that, I'm part of the Footprints project because the Periscope and the Witwornia Foundation are the two project leaders of the Footprints project. The idea is a European collaborative program to help the actors of the music sector to move around the European market and to consolidate European creative music community around three main themes, which are ecological, social, and economical challenges. How it works, it's actually kind of easy and complicated at the same time. We work on tour and on how to make a more sustainable tour, so on these three topics, and we do that by doing some research. So we did a research with 9 venues and festivals in France and in Europe on carbon calculation, and also we do experimental tours with artists and agents that are our second panel of artists and agents are actually here. And they will work on touring with the idea of getting more sustainable, and we will see what's working, what's not working, and how we can implement the changes in the rest of the music industry. To get back to the research that we did, we decided to do research because, as you said, there is not enough numbers, so we don't know where we come from, how we can change the problems that we have with the carbon. And so we had 4 venues and 5 festivals, each are different size, different location, and we had like 4 that were in a rural area and 5 in cities, big or small cities, and big or small venues and festivals. And to give you some numbers, so we can start with the basics. For the venues, 45% of their carbon footprint is made by the audience coming to the place, coming to the concert venue, and then 20% is from artists that comes to the venue to play. So for the venues, it's 65% of their carbon footprint is made by the travels. Also, there is a big impact of energy, which is around also 20% or 22% of the carbon footprints. And for the festival, it's a bit different because we could not take all the info on the place they're going to, because they only go there for a day or 2 days, and they may have like 10 different concert venues that they use, and we did not have time to do all that. So we have the results with the 75% of their carbon footprints is made by the audience going to the concert, and 18% made by the artist, which is huge. So so the idea is that now you have the numbers, they're all published, you can check it online with all the detail if you want to. And now we know that we have to work on the travels, and mainly on the audience, obviously, because it's the biggest impact, but also how to work with the artists on doing better work. I think I'll stop now.
Yeah, maybe I can just maybe ask you another question before we will actually talk about the artists, but maybe to get a bit deeper, because we're talking about the touring model a bit more specifically, and in the idea of calculating is really to have this action plan in place to go further and to support the artists you are working with. But how do you see for you like the climate emergency and also the climate justice frame? How does it path ahead for the mobility of artists in Europe and internationally? And maybe if you have like some fundamentals of reshaping international artist mobility given the climate emergency, what would that be?
I think we have to take the carbon footprint and our impact on the world really. We have to think about it and actually act now. First, because we are on stage and artists are on stage, so they can talk about it, and so they can have a real impact on the audience. So it's kind of, we have to be a role model for what's going on. And we actually found some solutions to start acting, even if you don't necessarily need to do your carbon footprints to know where to begin. The first, obviously, is to work on touring and not just going for one concert on the other side of Europe and back by plane. Obviously, that should not work like that. And to implement that, you need to work on your network. So it's not the artists that need to have all the pressure about how to reduce their impact and everything. It has to be coming from the producers, coming from the venues that work together to help making a smarter tour and a more responsible tour. And we have to stop with the exclusive concert. Like you can go there, but then you cannot play in the same area for at least 6 months. Now we need to make more concerts closer to each other, so the audience won't travel so far, and we need to work together with the producers, with the venues, with the artists to make something that makes more sense. Also, there is some easy stuff like you should switch to eating more vegetarian or vegan food than food with meat because it has less impact. Some stuff that are a bit more difficult, but obviously taking the train when you can is the best option. It's not always possible, not everywhere, and you always have to balance what you're using as carbon to what you will have on social impact, because sometimes the social impact is bigger and more important than the ecological impact that you will have, and so it's always a question of trying to balance that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, and we will speak about this with Sissel now. I wanted to ask you maybe, well, first time exercise to introduce yourself briefly, and then if some people don't know you already, and maybe just to react also to what Garance said, and maybe to this somehow misconceptions that we might have, especially because it was so big in the media, that with some artists, I'm thinking about Coldplay, for instance, or that started to speak a lot about this. So there was a big media focus on artists and on artist impact. But as Garance said, when we had the numbers and the study, we see that it's not the biggest impact, and that audience mobility is actually the biggest impact. So if you would like first to react to that and to tell us a bit about your own experience of this issue.
Yeah. My name is Sissel, and I have been a traveling musician the last 25 years. And as you mentioned, I see, of course, there's a huge difference now. People would not go to Delhi to play one concert at the Norwegian embassy anymore, which we did only 15 years ago, or, you know. So, and the mentality towards traveling and how you travel is changing. But also, I think, you know, like you say, music is mental health. The job we do is not insignificant when it comes to many other aspects than just the tones we're playing. I must admit that if I want to make my life work, everyday life, being a mom, being, you know, having my life in Trondheim, it's very hard for me to picture my professional life without taking quite a lot of flights. And I think for us musicians, it's really important to narrow it down, to see what can we actually do. It can all be so blurry, and so there's all these large questions, and you feel ashamed of traveling, and of course we put into conscious again, you know, the routes you travel, the how many concerts you play, if it's possible to choose different transport and more eco-friendly transport. But I think it's also important to concretize what we can do in other aspects, like, you know, how we choose to act when we are, you know, what food you eat, it all seems so small because the traveling is, you know, such a huge part of it, but it's very good for me as a musician to hear, you know, just the fact that yes, we are coming to the audience. If the audience should come and hear us, it would be a lot, many more travels. And I think, again, for you to kind of feel that you can act and make choices without also being paralyzed. I think all musicians I know are very, in my environment, are very humble, very concerned, very aware. And we talk about this a lot, but it's hard sometimes to really, you know, okay, you get a little paralyzed of the whole idea, you know, because you cannot avoid this flying. Let's say, from Trondheim, it takes me often one day to just arrive somewhere out in Europe, and one day back again, and the day of the concert. And how can you, you know, it would be very hard to do it on train or on bus, or yeah. So again, it's really good for me, and maybe for you guys to really just hear this really clear, the facts that you have, you know. Yeah. Because I think we all really also feel there's this shame also, you know, this, you know, that what you do is an important thing, but you also feel shitty about this traveling part of it, you know. Yeah, so how to deal with that and not just kind of, yeah, push the conscience away about it, you know. It's,
to have support also, I guess, from your entourage or from the venues to be able to maybe feel less guilty, as you said.
But I see also it's happening very much, I think, now in the recent years, also just awareness of, okay, you are served vegetarian food in many festivals, you know, these things that seems, they might seem small, but all these changes, all the sum of all these small changes is important to emphasize.
Have you noticed really like some changes during the recent years, or even specifically after the pandemic also, in the way like you are hosted, or the way that other musicians also take those issues into consideration?
Yes, I think there is a whole other awareness of these questions, and could be all from, you know, eating locally where you are. Again, it seems insignificant, but, you know, choosing not to ever have any change of towels in my room, or when I'm all these small things. But I think there is absolutely an awareness, but also this combined with, but how do we deal with it?
And how do we somehow reconcile this feasibility of going carbon neutral, but also this demand for international acts, like as Garance said, like to keep the balance also between the work, the necessity to work internationally. You are a very well established artist, but for emerging artists also it can be really a career-changing moment to have an opportunity even for one gig somewhere. So it's also something to really take into consideration for this.
And also the whole environment is dependent on all these exchanges. We need to travel across borders and to meet so that's also important to take into the whole math of it.
The whole picture. Yeah. Maybe Ceyda, it's a good moment also for you to jump in, talking about this, and also talking about taking into consideration the different context, and like really contextualizing, that's a tricky one, the question. And you also focus quite a lot on inclusivity in general. So after introducing yourself as well, and can you also share your thoughts on that and your approach also from your experience, but also from your current work right now on inclusivity?
Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Ceyda. Of course, the whole question is quite tricky, and it requires a very broad perspective. First of all, what I do, I have been working for many years as a festival programmer, one of those traveling. My former festival is in the European Festivals Associations, and if I think about 14 years, how we traveled from festivals to festivals, yes, I feel you with that chain. But currently, last 6 years, I'm based in Helsinki, and I founded MiklagårdArts, a small organization, and I focus on transcultural and transnational collaborations, not limited to only music, but of course at the heart of my work, music has an important place. But I have been engaged also diversity, equity and inclusion discussion in the Finnish context, inspired by my own experiences as a foreign-born art professional in that country. And currently I'm learning and deepening my understanding about sustainability. It's a long process. I think we should be humble and consider ourselves as the student of this kind of knowledge. But of course, at the heart of everything, when I look at through my own learning, what I see is lack of justice. So many global challenges that we face today, if you think about the polarized political situation, post-COVID inequalities, climate crisis, and other things that you can, new world order, whatever way you just define it, it's just because lack of justice, and it brings, of course, this intersectional understanding about those issues. How are we able to bring different issues together to be able to see the big picture, as you said, Sissel, the map? And of course, for those of you, if you are not familiar with intersectional approach in that context, in environmental sustainability, it deals with exercising power and how it affects people who face social inequalities. So basically, when we talk about this kind of approach, we need to think about not only justice, we need to think about power, we need to think about accountability, and all these come together and then bring us to another discussion. But of course, I like the idea of seeing also whole sustainability discussion with a broader lens, because usually we are time to time limited in social, cultural and environmental sustainability. But what about the sustainability of the art forms that we are working in? What about the sustainability of human being? After COVID-19 and all the restrictions that we all suffered from brought a big mental health issue in the industry, and how are we going to rebuild the ecosystem that will be responsive to the needs of future generations and the current emerging and young artists. I recently read a very interesting report produced by Art University Helsinki. Actually, it's the university where Sibelius Academy and other theatre and fine arts academies are located, reconstruction of art as a kind of roadmap. And there was a very interesting information which brought my, let's say, immediate attention, saying that currently, of course, referring to the Finnish arts and cultural scene, people working in the field coming from 1970s, and also the ones who are studying in the art universities probably will work in 2060. So if we look at this time, we are almost talking about a century. And of course, from the intergenerational perspective and knowledge transfer about this how these generations can teach each other, it's something else. But also this kind of quite broad understanding in arts and cultural field brings some difficulties that we have: conservatism and inability to respond to the need of change, which is quite human. We all suffer from that. It's not easy to change immediately, but the conditions that we face requires it. So therefore, it's important to get to know what's going on, and I think engage in a political part of arts and culture as an industry, and I think try to support each other, right? This is what I can say as a start.
Yeah, and since we are in the framework of a collaborative project, I think this is also a very important point. And maybe, well, this is a question actually to all of you, but maybe Ceyda, if you want to continue on that, and how do you perceive actually the role of networks in facing those challenges, but also the not in opposition, but like also the role of more local venues, music venues facing to this, and how they can work together better?
Well, of course, I can maybe respond to that from the position where I am, and I'm operating as an independent owner of a small organization with certain resources, and I also suffered personally through my work during this pandemic time, and of course all diversity, equity, inclusion and sustainability work, this public advocacy requires a very strong network. So it's important to be connected, first of all, to like-minded people. It creates a certain sense of belonging, that you feel that, okay, I'm not alone in this fight or in this difficulty, and that helped me a lot. And I see also many small organizers, small or independent players, that's important. But when it comes to, of course, how to deal with these big issues, we have to understand that there is not only one single perspective. Therefore, it's important to engage with different people from different industries, different backgrounds, different perspectives, because it's so complex. So there is no one magical approach that you implement, then everything will be fine. And we all know that creativity, innovation comes also through these diverse perspectives when they are in the room. For the small venues, as an answer to your question, I believe the biggest challenge, because I recently finalized Julie's Bicycle Creative Climate Leadership Program for Scandinavian.
Maybe just, sorry, if some people don't know Julie's Bicycle, this is an organization based in the UK which is working on environmental sustainability in all arts sectors.
Yeah, and you can check their website. They provide incredible information, so I think you should get as much as information possible. What I wanted to say there, I was together, of course, many different players from the Scandinavian region, and the biggest challenge is how to start, where to start. And if there is a knowledge, how are we going to get it? Because not every organization or players have enough resources to conduct a research, first of all, to understand the carbon print. And when you are asked also from the funding organizations in Finland, there is a very ambitious climate agenda proposed or introduced by the government. And this pressure is right now in the air. How are you going to really calculate your, as an organization, as a small festival or whatever way you operate, your carbon print and everything? I think the knowledge sharing currently is the most important issue, which would help everyone learn from each other and unlearn, of course, old habits. Maybe implement the good examples, but not to go to the failure. But at the end, embracing failure is also important, because there is so much discussion, and then one should try and experiment and find a better solution. Yeah, I think knowledge is the most crucial one currently.
Experimentation, it's actually about the project, Footprints project. Garance, if you want to share maybe also on this subject some of the experiments that you've tried.
Yeah, with Footprints we are six project leaders, or six organization working on that, and I think it's really interesting to talk about intersectional problems, because depending if you're in Slovenia, in Norway, in France, or in Poland, obviously you will have different approach and different difficulties. So what we're trying to do with Footprints, and I think it's a main idea that we need to work together with that, it's really to take as much info as we can from as much different places and make it available for everyone. So you can see an example on your organization, on your country, on the way you work, and see that some people have already started to make this change, so you know that you can follow up on that, and they are also aware of your problems, and you can call them and just say, okay, I want to start, where do I start? And so I think that's a really interesting idea. And also because there is a lot of pressure on all the artistic scene, and we are starting to have audience people that say, no, I choose not to take the plane, so I'm not going to go to a concert where an artist took the plane because it doesn't make sense. So we need to be here with numbers and say, well, actually, no, it's not like that. And just to give you an example of the number of tons of carbons per venue per year, it's like 236 tons per venue. And for a person in France per year, it's 11 tons. So it's when you see how many people you will touch with your venue, or with the music, or with everything, you can balance that out, and you can check other industries. And it's really good to be role model and to implement the best that we can, but we also are not the worst. And we have a really big social impact, and we touch so many lives, and it's important to continue.
Yes, even if we compare with other types of music within the industry, it's quite clear that our sector, like the jazz and improvised music sector, represents really small carbon footprints compared to big festivals and some practices that are definitely not sustainable. So it's also very important to have this kind of a sector-focused numbers and roadmap for this. Sissel, when we were preparing the panel this morning, also you shared also some of your thoughts on that, and coming back to this idea of intersectionality, and also to making sure that some decisions that are made are not made and kind of putting more pressure or more obstacles for different minorities or people that have already some issues. And you were saying like about gender, for instance, equality, and making sure also that those decisions are not going to increase, or like, because it's probably more difficult for women sometimes to spend more time traveling because of kids or because of family situations. Or do you have some thoughts on that also, and from your experience also, because you were sharing you also program a festival, so do you use also your experience as a musician to better think also how you will work on those issues in programming the festival?
To be honest, I haven't seen kind of my existence differently than I think, you know, just the fact that I have 2 kids, I can't be away. But this goes for, I think, a lot of people, no matter, you know, staying too many nights on the road, or it's all a puzzle, big puzzle. I program a little festival in Norway called Sodjas. We work on, you know, using local deliverers, or, you know, food and equipment, trying to have as low impact as possible when it comes to transport, urging also to take a train. But again, it's to be honest, I will say that I have more questions, and I think it's very, when you told us about this Julia's bicycle, I get immediately curious. Oh, can I go there and just have some concrete ideas of what can I do? Because I think that's the problem. Again, I'm repeating myself, but it gets so big, these questions for us. This is here and now, and of course we have long perspectives, and we are already on a good way. But I think for me, as a musician, having to deal with working in a way that I know has effects climate-wise, also it's such an important thing to just know that, okay, this is a possibility, this is a possibility. I was just thinking now, you know, to make networks and make for example, a web page telling you what's the most carbon low way of getting from this venue to that venue. You can take this train, you can take, there's a bus, blah, 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 all these very, very concrete things. Because as a freelance musician, there is so much stuff you deal with all the time. And sometimes there is just not the possibility of going into this research as well. So if there was databases for stuff like this, and with very concrete options, I think that would be something which would be, for me, a big help in navigating through all this, you know? Yeah.
Yes, it's true that there are, when you are deep in the subject, as we are, there's a lot of resources available, but it's also very difficult to have access to them. Most of them are actually in English, so there's also this language issue. And also, once you have the resource, you read it, but then it's how do you implement it as well? And as you said, some very practical tools like that. I think it exists in Finland, actually. I think Hiab in Helsinki developed this map where you telling you where you can go.
Rogers Orchestra also started, and now Maiden Festival is doing, and there's Citra Innovation Foundation. They just published what is the average or footprint of average person in Finland, foot carbon print. So if you need to calculate, yeah, the information started to flow, but still, it's a bit tough to get it.
We have questions already. Yeah. Okay, sure. Do we have a microphone maybe for?
I can speak.
Yeah.
I'll try.
Yeah, and if you can introduce yourself also.
Oh, now I get nervous. You don't want it? No, it's
all of the others will
I can also
hear
go
you.
to the stage. No. I'm joking. Yeah, I was wondering because I think I want to take the train, and it would be great to have find a database to get help on that. But especially also for this festival here, I would love to. I checked the trains, but the biggest problem is mostly it's more expensive, and to change that, I think it's trying to wanting to change capitalism or anything. I don't want that, but I mean, I see you're also connected to the European Union. So is there any way to see as because it's hard to take the responsibility as an artist because you have to book a flight or a trip that is as cheap as possible. The venue also say and I get that because there's not more than 150 euros for us to cover our travel expenses, but then it's impossible to go by train. Wouldn't be an option to see if there's funding for that specifically, that you can apply for it, and that kinds of stuff that makes it easier and also more accessible to take the train, because I think we're all willing to do that, but it's just too expensive, and sometimes of course also it takes more time, but I would love to take more time to travel. I can go by train, but how to get more money is, I think, always the question. Yeah.
Well, I can answer to that. Well, first we have a webpage with the Green Room, my organization, where we share those opportunities. They do exist for musicians in Germany. There was a pilot project to finance what they called slow touring. So it was from the Goethe Institute. And you have also different calls on the European level that can help for that. Not necessarily for musicians to apply directly, but it can be more of a collective project, or venue can apply for something to support this. And you see also more and more festivals. I don't know about venues, but I know festivals that are paying a bigger fee to artists that decide to take the train. So this is changing. It's changing slowly, but there are more and more possibilities to get funding for alternative ways.
And I think that's where network is important, because as an artist, emerging artist alone, trying to get a funding is a bit difficult, and it will take you a lot of resources, of time. You're not sure you're gonna get the grant and everything. But when we do work like that and we work together, then we will give our result to everyone, to the public, and we can have kind of act like a lobby, saying okay, we need, we know the solutions, and we don't have enough money to do that. We need to have more money, more time to do this or to do that, and then you can act directly to the government of your country, to our local government, or to the European Union, and say, okay, we actually did the research, we have everything, and what we need is money. So, hey.
Can I just add something on it? And I feel you, and I think you are very much right how much one can take responsibility as an individual with certain conditions. That's why I think I like to deepen my knowledge in this intersectional environmental sustainability, because it also advocates justice for people and earth. And when it comes to that, maybe one option would be, because we know that there is so much information, and not all of them are true when it comes to climate crisis, and there is a certain lobby who denies basically this crisis. And of course arts and culture has a very strong influential power and impact in that. So as a professional, there is always a way to contribute to this important transformation and discussion. Of course, as a maker, through our, let's say, daily work and daily practice, but also creating more and more awareness about it, just to talk about it like how we are talking in this kind of thing. So there is not only one way to be more maybe responsive towards the situation, because I also believe that while the big polluters are there and doing their business as usual practice, it's a bit unfair to expect individuals to take more and more guilt and in that sense arrange their actions. So we can use our impactful, power.
Is this a good time for Q&A? Because maybe you have
Sure.
other stuff to talk.
Sure, I have more questions, but if you have some, I'm really happy to.
So actually, it's connected to what Kika was saying, but are you also in contact? So considering that the majority of the carbon footprint of a venue is from the audience coming, are you also in contact with like local governments or usually institutions that have to do with what public transport actually exists to get to venues? Because of course most people's carbon footprint is stuff that they can't control, because we're not in control over exactly where the energy comes to power the trains or something that we have. But I can imagine that institutions like this can have power over governments to tell people like, okay, we need the audience to be able to get to the venue, or to know that the festival is happening and that they can get there with Metro 7, this kind of stuff. So I was wondering if you're in contact with any government institutions in that sense. And if it's okay, I have a second question, which is, are you also pushing for festivals to be wary of their sponsors? Because some festivals are also sponsored by, for example, banks that really do some awful stuff in terms of the money, the investing that they do with oil companies and stuff. So I was wondering if that's also part of the plan in terms of the message. Thanks.
So first question about contacts with local authorities about audience mobility.
I think once again it's because there was no data available. So before that we all knew that it was a problem, but we didn't necessarily realize how big of a problem it was. So now that we have more data, we will go and we will make it accessible for everyone. But in the same time, it's not our job. It's a complicated stuff, and we don't have as much power as we would like. I guess no one has as much power as they like. So, and also yes, it's a problem, and you have to work on it. But a festival in a rural area will have a huge ecological impact, which will be really terrible. But the social impact of having something of a cultural event far away from everything, meaning that people that don't have access to the culture during all year long will have an easy access, means that the social impact again will be really bigger than a festival that will take place in a city center or a huge city, where you can go by metro or bus or whatever, and the ecological impact will be really small because you will use already existing facilities and everything is already made for that. But the social impact will be way less important than on the rural area. So it's always really important to balance everything and make sure that you don't cut everything because it has an impact.
Can I just add something? I was just thinking also, because you spoke about us as deliverers of a message. We have a platform. We can also communicate. And I was just saying it. I was thinking it when you talked about the festival can also communicate to an audience knowledge about local. Let's say, local producers or just now when we're here and we eat in Amieux, we eat local and vegetarian. We have these plates that are degradable. We have all these tiny things that you can as a communicator via being an arranger or a musician or a promoter, or I think it's so important also to put that into the whole mathematics of this again, because we can be so we can be so drawn down by all these facts, you know, that we totally also almost forget the positive stuff we add into this world. Yeah.
Maybe just a little contribution from my side, not directly related to climate crisis, but I have been engaging more than 5 years in advocacy work in diversity, equity and inclusion, and I believe in the power that we all have as an individual, so it's also possible. Because the organization that we started with my colleagues as an NGO in 2017, I was there as a board and later chair, now only just a member for this healthy fresh blood circulation for any organization, that we pushed a lot to be able to improve the working conditions of immigrant artists in Finland, artists and cultural workers, that we made so much noise, Finnish Ministry of Culture and Education, and by the, let's say, special appointment of the minister himself, started a working group, and I was there 1 year, worked as an expert with a personal interpreter because the whole work was in Finnish. And then we published a report, Art, Culture and Diverse Finland report, and now I see that the recommendations on that report is just finding its own way in the field, and last 5 years I personally experienced a change in the Finnish field to be more diverse, more inclusive, trying to understand the hard working conditions for many marginalized, let's say, artists and cultural workers. We know that it's not limited with your identity. If you're not doing something mainstreamed, that you could be very well, and COVID also showed that anyone who works as a freelancer could be in a very precarious conditions under certain circumstances. So I would like to maybe remind us when it comes to power. We all have power, but it's also important when you're doing this advocacy to have a very clear and persistent dialogue with the policymakers, because this is how I believe as a professional after all those years, the whole machine that has been created to regulate, to distribute and govern this arts and cultural sector can be responsive if you really push the right button. So there is a power in everybody's hands. I mean, we can just use it, but to come together with the others to create a real pressure group matters.
And the second question, which is a tricky one also, any thoughts about the sponsorship for festivals by, I'm not sure it's really our field of competence here, but about festivals being sponsored by either fossil fuel companies or banks, probably depending also on their economical models on that. Any?
Well, I was following lots of happening in UK, Tate Modern and other galleries, BP, and I think it comes again how much power audience or civil people or activists have, and I think a similar discussion was going on in New York, the museum Whitney. And then one of the board members who seems to have a business with the weapon industry and so on was asked to leave. I believe that these ethical questions are getting more and more attention in arts and cultural sector, and it matters, of course, because we are concerned and it comes to social injustices, and we want to see that the distribution of the resources are fair, and we want to see that the working conditions are good. So it's important to see, but I cannot give right now any example when it comes to the announcing a sponsor, but I think there is so much discussion in general, the ethical part of the sponsorship. Yeah. British American Tobacco, I think, involved in some discussions, I believe.
We had I mean, maybe some of you Norwegians know, maybe.
Yes, I was just raising my hand to something else actually, because of what we talked about green touring. It's that you guys know about the European Jazz Network. It's EGN called in our language. EGN is now launching the Green Pilot Tour. It's a call this year, and the deadline is
there's a call this year in October, and another call in December next year. It's for members of EGN, Europe Jazz Network, but EGN is everywhere in Europe. It's 135 festivals, organizations, and etc. who are members. This Green Pilot Tour is, you can get into 6,000 euros in funding for setting up a green tour in Europe. So if you know anyone who's a member, or if you know there's in every country, go to the EGN website and check where your members are. It can be a festival or a national organization, and you can try to set up a tour and get the funding from this call. So October 22 and December 23, that's the calls for this project. So.
And does the venue apply for the funding?
Yeah, so you get in touch with the venue and say I have a tour, and you heard about this and this Green Pilot Tour, and they will know this, and so it's a way to try to make an effort and have some help in making the effort.
Just to talk about green touring, because it's kind of the main thing we do on Footprints, one of the main stuff we're working on. We see also a lot of info that are not really great info, oh, it's good, everyone should go and cycle from one place to another and everything, but it's always, you don't take into account the fact that you might be a mom or a dad, mostly the women are having problems when they have kids, not so much the fathers. You cannot leave for 3 months and do a tour when you're cycling. Maybe you have a disability that you see or that you don't see, and that you don't take into account. And maybe you have there is so many different problems, and we are always thinking as valid people, oh, it's easy, and we are all white, so it's again another problem that we have to take into account. And also it's about money, and women have less money than men when it's come to funding, when it comes to a lot of different stuff. And it's really important to work on green touring, it's really important to work on all that, but it's always, you have to take into account that for some people, well-established white male, for example, it's way easier to put into action some stuff, because they have the way of getting the money to do it. And when you're a young artist, if you're a female, if you have a disability, if you have you come from an immigrant past, we talked about that earlier, and everything, it's always going to be more difficult. So you always have to work on all of this stuff together.
Is there another question?
I could just be curious to hear if any of you musicians have any concrete situations, concrete experiences, concrete, if there is any of you who travel a lot or have, maybe not, but it's also so important that we share among us everything that contributes into this direction, So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for what you are doing, because it's a very important subject, I think. I have a question about the data. You told it was 60% for the audience and 20% for the artist. Around that, but I am thinking, is it 60% for one guy from the audience and 20% for one guy for the artist? Because on the proportion, I think it will be, say, to have the same footprints, you should have something like 9 artists for 3 of the audience. So it means, I will try to be clear, sorry. It means I have the impression it's 20% is already very big, because there is maybe 4 or 5 people on stage for maybe 100 people on the audience?
The numbers are on 1 year. So during 1 year, we took all of the artists that came to the venue.
Yeah.
We took all of their tour. We divided by the number. Well, if you're interested in that,
Yeah,
I can explain to you how we calculated that afterwards. And we took all the artists' carbon footprints of 1 year and all the public that came in 1 year. So we know the data because we have to put it into our grant application and everything. So we know how many people are coming to our venue, and we divided all that. So it's not 9 people and 9 artists and like 100 people in the audience. It's on 1 year.
Yes, we have 2 more questions.
Yeah, just Sissel, about what you're saying about experiences and everything. I'm actually booking a tour for my trio in February, and I, you know, when you're playing in Europe, I mean, basically I found that it's really complicated also to travel with trains when you're doing big distance, because, you know, I mean, when you have a band, basically you need to book as closer as possible. I mean, for that you can have the budget to tour. And how can we handle that, you know? Because, for example, if you're playing in Paris, then you need to take a train, and then it takes like, I don't know, 8 hours, and then you need to have a day off so you can actually travel by train, or, you know, this kind of stuff. And I think it's so it's a budget first issues, but also time-wise, how can we do, you know? I mean, I don't know if I'm clear with my question.
Maybe you just need to start your career, you know, and sometimes starting your career means that you have to make the smartest choice for your career, even though you're going to have to take the plane and it's not ecological. But once you start to be a bit more settled as a musician, then you can actually have an impact. But you cannot just stop your activity because you need to tour, you need to play. We need to have artists that meet each other, that you need to listen to music that does not come from just your local scene, but also from international scene, because that's what makes music beautiful. It's all the creativity that you mix. And sometimes it means that, yes, you will have to take the plane. No, it's not going to be the smartest choice for like ecological reason, but it will be the smartest choice for the beginning of your career. And that's why we also need to have more data, because your choice as an artist is not as important for the ecological impact as you would think. It's better to have an audience that is local than to have artists that takes the train, you know. And you need to remember that it's not only your choice, it's not only you that tour that have an impact, but the fact that we are building like bigger and bigger venues with so many audience that they have to come from all over Europe to go to see a concert, and that we use a lot of energy, and that we put stuff on paper everywhere and all that. You know, it's not just your choice as an artist that makes an impact, and we can work on all of the rest, and you take the plane, you know, or you take a car.
Okay.
You have to.
Yeah.
I was just curious if it's
No, please go.
no, just a very short follow-up to Øyvind, what you told about. You say you can apply for a green tour. So what defines a green tour? Is it only the travels? Is there how elastic is that definition? What, you know, would that also make, yeah?
It's elastic, yes. I would advise to go to the website.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, again. It's elastic, yes, of course, and there's a scheme. You have to read it because it's more specific than this, but it's a way to try to do, you know, to put up green tours in Europe across. and it's to help the mobility of artists across Europe. So it's not that different from Footprints in one way. But it's for the members, so you have to be festival or organization to apply. So you have to go to one of these that's close to you. The criteria is I would have done a presentation for it because then it would be more precise. So I guess the best thing is to go to your device and have a look more precisely.
Just the fact that reading that could make us also conscious about other ways of thinking, you know, because
it's also something for musicians to go to an organizer and say this exists, and I guess not every member of EGN knows this even because it's relatively new. It was launched in Lausanne this spring in Switzerland, so it's kind of a new project, and it's a pilot tour, so it's 2 times now, and I guess we will continue it afterwards as EGN house. Not precisely answering your question.
No, but it's a good answer. It make everything that can be as clear as possible is
better. Okay.
I just want to check with Carolina how long we still have, if we can still take some questions.
Yeah, we can have like 10 minutes because then we'll have 2 hours break for dinner.
Perfect.
So
Ceyda, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, thank you. Just very short contribution. When we think about the whole arts and cultural sector, or let's say creative sector, that we have to really think about how big this machine is. So there are many supporting parts or the administrative part of it. For instance, it was quite normal to go for 1 or 2 hours meeting to Brussels for many EU-related organizations. Just jump on a plane, go there, and luckily people realize that, and we all have been Zoomified, so there are some online tools that you don't need to fly. I mean, there has been so much maybe fairs and of course these person-to-person gatherings are quite important when it comes to artistic creativity, but other, let's say, congresses that you go and see technical products and everything, so they are taking place in a different way. So there is always an alternative, I think, instead of thinking only individual artists who needs to really do this job, we have to think that the responsibility comes for everyone. And I think we should also learn to hold big organizations, big players also accountable in that sense, and then do, of course, our best in our own working structure.
If I may just add one thing, because being at international jazz platform, where the international aspect is a key thing, we strongly believe that our sector develops through international relationships and contacts. So we are here, all of us from different countries, and we really believe this is important for you guys to meet each other, to exchange experiences, to learn from each other, to support each other, create these, families. But at the same time, I think our role is actually to defend this international aspect of music and to defend the right for the music to develop internationally. And we, with the numbers, like Garance mentioned, that's why it's so important to know the numbers, because there is a lot of misconceptions, and they are like trying to say that, no, only local artists playing in local venues, and this is okay. And I remember we had, because we have also the Oslo edition of the platform, and I remember this discussion I had with the one young Norwegian artist who told me that he doesn't feel entitled to continue this career. He doesn't feel privileged to continue this career because it's so, it involves international traveling, especially for artists coming from the peripheral parts of Europe. And then so do we want really artists to leave the sector? Do we really want them to stop working because they feel ashamed and they feel responsible? So I remember it started the long discussion about, this is their work. They want to earn money, and they will not cancel a gig because of their environmental impact, and they will not have, I don't know, the money to survive this month. So of course, again and again, we are stressing that this is not your responsibility. You can do what you can, of course, but that's why we are pushing organizers, other promoters, and that's their responsibility to provide you the opportunities that you can play more and that you can create sustainable tours. So this is very important, I think, especially here when we are here with this community. We really want you guys to develop, to create these networks, to create these bands across borders, because this is how the music develops. This is how this is where it feeds from. And we have this big question, and we have to take this question into account. But after 2 years of the pandemics, we know how hard life is also for young musicians. So it's not the time to cancel gigs, but at the same time it's on all of us. And artists are even more conscious. They are so sensitive to these issues, and that's why they feel more responsible. So this is something we also want you to know. Oh, it's all kind of statement.
We had 1, 2 other questions.
Thank you. I wanted to elaborate a little bit on, Sissel, you asked for experience in the field. Maybe I don't have that much experience, but I work for a venue in Amsterdam, and I see 10 to 15 writers a week or so, and I do really see a very big change in what artists ask for. Also, beginning artists, established artists, we do have a power to ourselves to ask for certain things, and of course the level of the power and how big it is, changes, the more established you are. But even beginning young emerging artists can start with vegetarian emails? No, vegetarian meals, no plastic on the stage, and a little bit somebody more established can. I saw a writer the other day saying, "Sure, I'll come to the BIMAS for a gig, but I'm playing a masterclass in the conservatory the next day, and I need you to pay for 2 nights of hotel." I think we do have to be aware of the power even young people that are starting out have. Even if it's just small, it'll start small. But in 10 years, maybe, who knows what kind of questions you can ask or requirements you can have to be able to get the gig. So no, we don't have to go and cancel our gigs, but we can ask for smaller things in a writer, or at least, and also I see it in the BIM house, when you get so many of these writers, it also starts the conversation in the organization, because the production managers will raise the question in a meeting saying, "Hey, I've seen this request on a writer so many times, maybe we should ask the chef to always cook vegetarian, or maybe we should ask Frank to revisit this whole hotel scheme, or maybe we should talk to Lantaren Venster in Rotterdam, can they take this band for the next day?" It's also about starting the conversation, and I think starting the conversation is definitely something that we can do as young people, and being clear in our message, so we can rule the world.
That's a great point to be aware of for us. Yeah, because exactly there is so much stuff that you just, let's say plastic, for example, that you accumulate all the time, and you just knowing that, okay, I can put out that statement saying, "I don't want plastic bottles on the stage."
And the venue listens. And the venue will start thinking, I know Periscope is doing it, they will start thinking, okay, how can we eliminate plastic? That's not the artist's problem, that's a venue problem. So let's put the problem where it belongs. Same with how the audience travels. Like, the North Sea Jazz Festival happened last weekend. They do a great job with giving everybody the information on how to get there by public transport. The festival was done, everybody was drunk as hell, but everybody knew where to take the metro, stuff like that. It just, it helps.
But apparently not where to throw their plastic glass. That's a note on the side.
Yes, trash cans, more trash cans, yes.
One other question, one last one, I think.
Okay, thank you. I'm also thinking about small changes. And speaking of the experience, for example, recently I have been traveling for one concert to another country, and it was organized like the way we had like booked 2 connecting flights. So the result was we were traveling for one concert by 4 planes, cars, and 2 times by train. And it was like done because it was the cheapest way, just the cheapest flights. And I think maybe the venues or like organizers could predict like with the the amount of time, the costs, and for example give much more budget for the travel expenses because of such situation, not to do the cheapest way but the most ecological. And like for flights, like it was really exhausting for artists, so it's like I think the worst solution, and it was done like only because it was the cheapest. So I think such things are the small changes that will make a great difference in the future when, for example, this will be a standard, like the standard way of thinking. And I think like to start from this point, it could be really important.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a very important point. And rather than maybe sometimes we tend to name and shame, but kind of showing that it's possible and make the train fun and sexy again, and all this, showing that this is possibilities. I do travel a lot by train, and I find it way more comfortable, and sometimes you can find cheaper options. So it's a matter to show that this is possible. Thank you so much, Ceyda, Sissel, and Garance. And we are around for like the evening and tomorrow as well. So if you have other questions for our panelists, we will be happy to answer. And I don't know if Carolina, you have some logistics information for the rest of the night. But from my side, thank you very much for listening to us and sharing your experiences and questions, and see you around.